A small, neat pile of human fingernail clippings sat just behind the metal grate of the air vent in my bedroom. This happened last Tuesday. My name is James. I was in downtown Cleveland for the week, staying in a cheap Airbnb. I was tight on cash, with 3 career-defining job interviews lined up, and I just needed a place to crash. The place was the definition of cheap. A shoebox in an old high-rise. Cracked plaster, and the only window faced a brick wall 3 feet away. The host, Eli, was app-only. All automated messages. The key was in a lockbox. I never saw him. It was perfect for me. I didn't need small talk. I needed a shower and a bed. The first night, I couldn't sleep. The room was hot, the air so still it felt suffocating. The ancient window AC unit just rattled and spat out the same lukewarm, mildewy air. I figured the ventilation was clogged. The vent was a simple metal grate, high on the wall near the ceiling, painted over so many times it was almost sealed shut. I dragged the rickety wooden desk chair over and stood on it. I turned on my phone's flashlight and pointed it inside the slats. That's when I saw them. It wasn't a clump of dust or debris. It was a distinct, deliberate pile of fingernails. Maybe 30 or 40 clippings, pale crescents gleaming in my light. They were clean. They were just piled there, right behind the grate, like someone had been sitting in the dark shaft, calmly trimming their nails, letting them fall. My stomach turned. I fought back a gag, found a pencil, and used it to poke the clippings out through the slats, one by one, onto a piece of paper. I balled it up, threw it down the hall's garbage chute, and washed my hands with scalding water. The next day, my first interview went well. I got back to the room around 8 p.m., exhausted. Out of some morbid curiosity, I got back on the chair and shined my light into the vent. My heart froze. There was a new pile, smaller than the first, maybe 5 or 6 clippings. But they were there. I immediately grabbed my phone and messaged Eli. Hey, weird question. Is the ventilation in my room, 12B, connected to other apartments? Like a shared shaft? His reply was almost instant. Hi, James. No, that is your private ventilation system. Hope you're enjoying your stay. Private system. That night, I lay in bed, perfectly still, just staring at that dark rectangle on the wall. At 3 a.m., I heard it. A faint, dry scraping. SCRRTCH, SCRRTCH. It was rhythmic. It sounded exactly like a single, long fingernail being dragged slowly back and forth against the inside of the metal duct. I was wide awake. The next morning, I went to a corner store and bought a roll of heavy-duty duct tape. I went back to the room and sealed the vent. I taped over every single slat. I went horizontal, then vertical, sealing the grate to the wall. No air, no sound, nothing was getting through. I felt better. I went to my second interview. When I got back that evening, the tape was still there. But it had been altered. Someone had used an X-Acto knife or a razor blade to cut a precise, 2-inch square directly in the center of my tape job. A perfect little peephole. And on the floor, directly beneath the vent, was a single piece of folded notebook paper. I picked it up. Scrawled in pencil, in shaky block letters, it said, I can't see. That was it. I was done. Screw the interviews, screw the deposit. I flipped open my hardshell suitcase and started frantically throwing my clothes into it. I wasn't folding, I was just jamming them in, trying to get the zipper closed. The second I zipped the suitcase shut, I heard it. Bang! A loud, metallic crash from the vent. I snapped my head up. The entire grate bulged outward, showering the wall with plaster dust. Bang! Another one. Someone was kicking it from the inside. I was frozen. Bang! The old screws ripped out of the plaster. The metal grate flew across the room, hit the opposite wall with a sickening clang, and crashed to the floor. A cloud of thick, black dust billowed out of the dark hole. For 1 second, there was total silence. Then a foot emerged. A foot in a filthy, grayish-white sock. Then another. A man, impossibly tall, skeletal thin, began to squeeze himself out of the narrow opening, a hole that shouldn't have fit a child. He twisted like a snake. He was pale, wearing nothing but a set of gray long underwear. His hair was sparse and plastered to his scalp. He dropped to the floor with a wet, heavy thud. He was chewing on something. He slowly turned his head to look at me. I could see it clearly now. He was chewing his own fingernails. My brain went static. Adrenaline surged through me like an electric shock. He wasn't stuck. He was out. He looked at me, and his mouth opened, and he let out a high-pitched, piercing shriek. It wasn't a shriek of aggression. It was a shriek of frustration. I grabbed the only heavy thing near me, my fully packed suitcase. He started to shamble toward me, and I swung it with all my strength, aiming for his legs. The sound of the hard plastic shell connecting with his shin was like a dry branch snapping. He howled, a sound that was not human, and fell over. I thought I'd won. I lunged for the door, fumbling with the deadbolt. But I was wrong. He didn't stay down. He scrambled back to his hands and knees with terrifying speed. I thought he was coming for me. He wasn't. He completely ignored me. He skittered, spider-like, straight for my bed. He crawled onto it, buried his face deep in the pillow I had slept on, and began to sniff. Deep, greedy, suffocating gasps. He made this choking, ha-ha-ha sound, inhaling the scent from my pillow. He was just there, his back to me, lost in the pillow. I didn't wait. I didn't try to understand. I yanked the deadbolt, ripped the door open, and sprinted into the hallway. I just screamed and hammered the elevator button. It didn't come. I gave up, threw open the stairwell door, and basically fell down 12 flights of stairs. I didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away, hyperventilating under a streetlight. I called the police from a 24-hour convenience store. They went. Of course, by the time they got there, the man was gone. They found the apartment empty. But they checked the vent. It didn't lead to any other apartment. It led to a sealed-off, unmapped service shaft between the walls. The bottom of the shaft was filled with food wrappers, empty water bottles, and piles of human hair. The police confirmed that Eli didn't exist. The ID he used on the app was stolen. The building's owner didn't even know that unit was being rented out. I never went back for my suitcase. I couldn't. A few days later, a detective called me. He said when they were inventorying my abandoned belongings, they found a small GPS tracker sewn into the lining of my suitcase. They also found a small, sealed plastic baggie. Inside it were several long strands of my hair. The kind you pull out of a hairbrush. But here's the thing. I didn't leave a brush there. My brush was in my backpack, which I'd had with me. He must have collected them from the shower drain. I didn't take the job. I left Cleveland the next day. I still don't know what he wanted. I don't think he ever planned to hurt me. He was just observing me, collecting the pieces I left behind. When I tried to stop him, when I taped up that vent, I didn't lock him out. I just annoyed him. I got in his way. I blocked his view. On the last page of the host's welcome guide, scrawled in what looked like dried blood, was one final rule. Do not make the clicking sound. My name is Sam. Last weekend, my girlfriend Chloe and I rented a car and drove deep into the pine forests of northern Minnesota. Our destination was an A-frame cabin, the kind that looks perfect and secluded on Instagram. The host left the key under a fake rock on the porch. The place was nice, smelled like cedar and fireplace ash. On the kitchen table, there was a welcome guide bound in twine. Chloe started unpacking. I skimmed the guide. The rules were specific, not the usual checkout by 10 a.m. stuff. Please respect the house. It is old and does not like to be disturbed. After 10 p.m., do not, under any circumstances, turn on the outside lights. Do not. The kitchen sink drips. Let it. The door to the basement, off the kitchen, is kept locked for your safety. Do not attempt to open it for any reason. This guy's a bit of a control freak. I laughed, tossing the guide back on the table. Whatever, Chloe called from the loft. It's beautiful up here. That night, we built a fire, drank some wine. Around 9:30, we stepped out onto the porch. The air was frigid and clear. I pulled my Zippo lighter from my pocket to have a cigarette. I flicked my thumb. The lighter lid snapped open with a sharp, metallic click. In the dead silence, pine-shrouded night, a sound answered us from beneath our feet. Click. It was crisp, dry, and a perfect mimic of my lighter. It came from under the house. From the basement. What was that? Chloe whispered, grabbing my arm. The pipes probably, I said, but I didn't light the cigarette. I snapped the lighter shut. Click. It mimicked the closing sound too. This time it sounded closer, like something was standing directly on the other side of the basement door. We both stood frozen. All I could hear was my own heart and the wind in the trees. Sam, Chloe's voice trembled, look at the guide. Now. We rushed back inside, locking the door behind us. I grabbed the guide, flipping through the pages frantically. Just when I thought I'd seen every page, I noticed the very last one. This page wasn't typed. It was written in a brownish red ink or something else in a desperate, jagged script. It was just one sentence. Do not make the clicking sound. My blood went ice cold. I looked over at the closed, heavily painted white door next to the kitchen. The basement door. It looked so ordinary, but now it felt like the entrance to a tomb. Okay, I forced myself to say, we'll be quiet. We'll watch a movie and go to sleep. We leave first thing in the morning. We retreated to the upstairs loft bedroom, keeping the TV volume barely audible. But the old house was full of sounds. When I set the remote down on the nightstand, the plastic made a soft tap. Tap. The reply from the basement was instant. Chloe gasped. I put my hand over her mouth and mine. We turned the TV off. We just lay there in the dark, terrified to move. The house settled in the cold. A floorboard groaned. Groan. It was mimicking us. It was listening to every single noise we made and copying it perfectly. We lay like statues for hours. Sometime around 2 a.m., Chloe's nerves were clearly shot. I'm dying of thirst, she whispered. I'm going downstairs for water. Don't, I pleaded. Don't move. I can't stand it, Sam. I'll be so quiet. She crept down the stairs, barefoot, like a ghost. I could hear her in the kitchen, running the tap in the slowest possible trickle. Then, I heard her sharp, suppressed sob. Her hand was shaking. The glass slipped from her grip. It shattered on the kitchen's tile floor with a sound that felt like an explosion. Chloe let out a short, choked scream. 1 second of pure silence. Then from the basement came the echo. Crash, smash, bam. It wasn't the sound of one glass breaking. It sounded like an entire glass window or a whole cabinet of glassware had been violently thrown and shattered. Run! I yelled from the loft. And in that instant, every light in the house went out. The main power died. We were plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness and silence. Then we heard it. The sound we had been dreading. Krrr chunk. A heavy metallic, grinding sound. The heavy-duty deadbolt on the basement door, a lock we hadn't even seen, was being drawn back. From the inside, the door creaked open. We couldn't see anything, but we could hear it. A wet, dragging sound. Something heavy, pulling itself up the basement stairs. And then the sound that started it all. Click. 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 It wasn't mimicking anymore. It was making the sound on its own, like it was chattering its teeth. It was moving around the dark living room, hunting for us. Chloe and I were huddled at the base of the loft stairs, paralyzed. I could hear it breathing. A wet, hissing sound. Then it stopped. I held my breath. And then I heard it. It was holding its breath, too. In terror, I gasped. H. It answered with its own gasp. A wet, gurgling inhale, 10 times louder. It was using sound to find us. A thought snapped into my head. It's drawn to sound. We have to make a sound. A loud one. Away from us. I grabbed Chloe's arm, put my mouth to her ear, and used the smallest puff of air I could. Kitchen. Dishes. Now. I felt her nod. I meanwhile started to feel inch by inch toward the fireplace. My hand touched cold metal, the fire poker. Chloe fumbled in the dark toward the kitchen. I heard her hand hit the counter. Maybe it was panic, maybe it was intentional. I don't know. But she didn't just push one plate. She grabbed the entire metal dish drying rack from the counter and shoved it, with all her strength, onto the floor. The sound of metal and ceramic crashing and shattering was deafening in the tiny cabin. In that instant, the thing snapped. No more mimicry, no more stalking. It let out a high, bird-like shriek and charged into the kitchen. I heard it overturn the table, its heavy body smashing against the cabinets, the sounds of more glass and plates breaking under its weight. "Now!" I screamed. I grabbed Chloe's hand. We didn't grab our coats, our phones, or the car keys. We just ran for the front door. I ripped the door open, the freezing air stinging my face. We ran barefoot across the frosted porch and scrambled for the car. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. The headlights snapped on, piercing the darkness, illuminating the A-frame cabin we had just fled. And in that split second I saw it. It was pressed against the living room window. A pale, eyeless, long-limbed creature. Its lipless mouth was wide open, revealing long, chattering teeth, making that click, click, click sound. When our light hit it, it threw its head back and smashed it against the glass. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The tires spun on the gravel, then gripped. We flew down the dirt road. We drove for a full hour, not stopping until we were in the fluorescent lights of a gas station in some small town. We were both shaking, wearing nothing but our pajamas. We never went back for our things. Later that day, from a motel room, I worked up the courage to send a message to the host. "There's something in your basement. It's out." Hours later, my phone vibrated. He had replied. Just 5 words. "You broke the rules." I went back to look at the Airbnb listing. It was gone. The page just said, "This listing is no longer available." I don't know what we woke up, but I know that host kept it locked down there, and we, the guests, were the unwitting zookeepers. Our only job was to not make a sound. The soaking wet woman standing at the end of the dock turned around slowly. She didn't have a face, just a smooth, mirror-like sheet of skin, perfectly reflecting my own horrified, wide-mouthed expression through the glass. It happened last month. I live in the Arizona desert now. I will never go near any body of water bigger than a bathtub again. My 6-year relationship with Mark was over. It wasn't a clean break. It was a slow, catastrophic disintegration. By the time I finally moved out of our shared apartment, I felt hollowed out. I needed a place, somewhere absolutely quiet and isolated, to figure out who I was and what came next. That's why I rented the Airbnb in northern Minnesota. The listing was called Lakeside Serenity. The photos showed a beautiful, modern cabin surrounded on 3 sides by forest and on one side by a vast, clear lake. It came with a long private dock and a canoe. The reviews were full of words like healing, peaceful, and a sanctuary for the soul. It was exactly what I needed. The drive took 11 hours. The last 20 miles were on a gravel road, and my cell service died long before I arrived. Perfect. The cabin was just as pictured. The key was under the mat. The inside smelled like pine and fireplace smoke. The best part was the wall facing the lake. It was entirely glass from floor to ceiling. I dropped my bags, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the porch, feeling the tension in my shoulders unwind for the first time in months. I should have left that first night. Darkness fell quickly. The lake became a sheet of black glass. As I was staring into the black, I saw a light. Flash, flash, flash. A flashlight from the opposite side of the lake. I frowned. The host's description had explicitly stated the far shore was undeveloped state forest preserve. Probably lost campers, I thought. I didn't think much of it, locked the glass door, and pulled the curtains to sleep. The next morning, I woke up to make coffee. I pulled back the curtains. A low fog was hanging over the lake. And then my heart dropped. The red canoe, which I had checked the night before and seen tied securely to the dock, was now floating 20 yards offshore. I walked down to the dock. The rope was still there, but the end, it had been cleanly cut. Not frayed from wear. Not untied. Sliced, as if with a very sharp knife. My first feeling was anger, not fear. I assumed it was some local kids playing a prank. It took me an hour, using a longboat hook I found in the shed, to snag the canoe and pull it back. I dragged it all the way up onto the lawn, far from the water. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk along the shore. The cabin's beach was mostly small pebbles and dark, wet mud. That's where I saw the footprints. They were small and barefoot. They came out of the water, walked a perfect, complete circle around my cabin, staying about 10 feet from the walls at all times, and then went straight back into the lake. I crouched down to look closer. The prints were sunk incredibly deep into the mud, far deeper than my own when I stepped beside them, as if the person who made them was impossibly heavy. And they were perfectly spaced. Every single step was identical. That's when the anger vanished, replaced by a cold, crawling dread. I ran back to the cabin and locked every door and window, even though it was the middle of the day. The real terror began after dark. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the sofa in the living room with all the lights off, just staring at that black expanse of water. Around 2 a.m. it started. Thud. A deep, muffled impact. Thud. It was repeating. The sound wasn't coming from the woods. It wasn't on the roof. It was coming from under the water. Thud. It sounded like someone had dived under my dock and was methodically hitting the wooden support pilings with a large rock. The sound was traveling through the water, through the foundations, and straight up into the soles of my feet. Thud. 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 I curled up on the sofa, pulling a blanket over my head, shaking like a child. It went on for an entire hour. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. I was done healing. I was done with serenity. I turned on every light in the cabin and started packing. I didn't care about the money. I was driving out of there as soon as the sun came up. At 5 a.m., the sky was a deep, bruised blue. I had my suitcase by the door. I grabbed my car keys. I walked to that massive glass wall one last time, just to see if the fog had cleared enough to drive. That's when I saw her. She was just standing there, at the very end of the dock, with her back to me. A woman, wearing some kind of old-fashioned, tattered white dress. Her dark hair was plastered to her back, dripping. "Hey!" My voice was hoarse with fear. "You! Get out of here!" She didn't move. I grabbed the heavy fireplace poker, ran to the glass, and banged it hard, making a loud clang. "I'm calling the police." I lied, knowing I had no signal. Then, very, very slowly, she began to turn. And that's when I saw it. The hook. She had no face. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a smooth, undulating sheet of skin like liquid chrome. She turned to face me, and all I could see on her face was my own terrified reflection. She started coming toward me. She wasn't walking. She was floating. Her feet were inches off the wooden planks of the dock, gliding smoothly, effortlessly toward the cabin. The lights in the cabin began to flicker violently. Flicker. She was off the dock, onto the grass. Flicker. She was on the porch. Flicker. She stopped, just on the other side of the glass door, inches away from me. She slowly raised a hand, pressing one mirror-like finger against the glass. I heard the glass creak under the pressure. Then she pressed her face against it. The last thing I saw was my own screaming, distorted reflection in her features. The next second, every single light bulb in the cabin exploded at once. Total darkness. In the pitch-black silence, I heard one sound. Crack. The sound of shattering glass. She was coming in. The last thread of my sanity snapped. Survival took over. I grabbed my car keys from the table, and I ran. I didn't run for the front door, which was closest to her. I ran blindly for the back door on the opposite side of the house, the one that led to the driveway. I slammed into a dining chair, cracking my knee on the hardwood, but I didn't care. I scrambled up, fumbled with the deadbolt on the back door, and ripped it open. I burst onto the small back porch, and ran straight into a wall of ice. No, not a wall. It was her. She was standing right there, blocking my only path to the car. How had she moved that fast? In the moonlight, her face was a cold, silver gleam. She grabbed my wrist. Her skin wasn't skin. It felt like ice, like oiled glass. I couldn't get a grip. Her strength was unbelievable. She started to pull me, dragging me back, away from the car, toward the house, toward the lake. I let out a scream I didn't know I was capable of. I clawed at the doorframe with my free hand, trying to hold on. My fingers brushed against something hanging on a hook by the door. Something heavy and plastic. The flare gun. The host had mentioned it in the welcome manual. For bears. I didn't think. I ripped it off the hook. With the same hand she was holding, I jammed the muzzle of the gun against her smooth, featureless face and pulled the trigger. The boom was deafening, a blinding flash of red light. The sound she made will haunt me forever. It wasn't a scream. It was the high-pitched, shattering sound of 1,000 wine glasses breaking at once. The red flare illuminated her as her entire body cracked like a broken mirror. The pieces, the shards of her, just melted in midair. The grip on my wrist vanished. I fell backward onto the porch, splashed by an icy, bone-chilling liquid. There was no blood, no body. Just a large puddle of rapidly evaporating lake water. I didn't get my luggage. I scrambled into my car, started the engine, and just floored it. I didn't even turn on the headlights. I just drove, blind and frantic, down that gravel road. I don't know how long I drove before I ran out of gas at a station in Wisconsin. I called the police. I called Airbnb. The police went out to the cabin. They found all the bulbs blown. They found the massive glass door cracked and spiderwebbed. They found a large water puddle on the back porch and a spent flare cartridge. But they said there was no sign of an intruder. Weeks later, when my hands finally stopped shaking, I started searching online. Anything about that lake. I found an old, obscure local history blog. It said that 100 years ago, a religious zealot used that lake for forced baptisms. A woman who refused him was drowned, held under the water until she stopped fighting. Her body was never found. The local legend, the one not on any tourist site, says she still haunts the water, looking for the brokenhearted. People who, like her, feel betrayed and alone. She tries to pull them in, so she won't be alone anymore. I moved to Tucson. It's hot and it's dry, but sometimes when I'm looking into a glass of water or at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror, I always wonder, when I look into that reflection, is my face really the only one I'm seeing?